Hello, everybody, and welcome to a spoiler podcast on Marvel Studios' Halloween special, Werewolf by Night. I am one of your hosts, Connor Nielsen, and joining me, as always, is the Comics Kid 2099. How are you doing, Comics Kid?
I am doing spooktacularly. Sorry, that halfway into that, I decided to become the Crypt Keeper, and I don't think I pulled it off. How are you, Connor?
I have my eyes of newts and my fingers from a dead, strangled infant. I am making my witch's brew and, getting in with the October season. Why don't you describe us the plot of Werewolf by Night?
Well, this is set in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and it involves after the famous monster hunter Ulysses Bloodstone died, a group of monster hunters gather at the Bloodstone Manor to hunt down a monster on the grounds, and whoever can kill the monster will get the famous Bloodstone, which I believe will give them a certain edge in their monster hunting careers. And so it's kind of like the most dangerous game, sort of, but it's just a group of monster hunters hunting down a creature, and it's in black and white. It's directed by Michael, correct me if I'm saying this wrong, Giacchino, the guy who composed the music from The Batman. I was surprised to see that he was directing this. I didn't know he did stuff outside of composition with music, but and it's just counting the credits, it's like 54 minutes long. So it's not like a feature-length movie, but it's longer than like an episode of television. And that is like the bare bones plot. I didn't spoil like any of the specifics on characters just yet, but we will get into some spoilers. And Connor, you had sent me a message saying, hey, we need to talk about Werewolf by Night. And I was kind of thinking like, oh, okay. Like I didn't know anything about it. Hadn't seen the trailer, didn't know who was in it. And I was thinking like, well, it's the MCU, so let's just rip this Band-Aid off. And then I watched it this morning, and this is one of my favorite things in the MCU right now. I love this so much. This is my favorite thing since Endgame. What do you think of this, Connor?
Okay, so you had not seen the previews, have you? Okay,
no.
Cool. Because I was curious. So this is interesting because I was really excited about this, and I didn't like it at all. So this will be, I think, a very, very interesting discussion then. So I was maybe putting a little too much expectation on this, but for myself, I've been watching a few werewolf movies so far this month. In October, my brother and I are trying to watch, some horror movies that we hadn't gotten around to yet. So I finally watched Joe Dante's The Howling. I finally gave An American Werewolf in London a rewatch for the first time since I was in like high school. And I didn't really like either of those. And I don't really like the original The Wolfman all that much. I think it's pretty, in my opinion, of the Universal Monster movies I've seen, decidedly the weakest of those. And so I was like, maybe I just don't like werewolf movies, because in the case of The Wolfman, An American Werewolf in London, and The Howling, so much of that movie is just these people just being like, oh my god, I'm going to turn into a werewolf. At some point I'm going to turn into a werewolf. And it's like, you're there to see them turn into a werewolf. And so you only get like one or two like werewolf sequences, and maybe you get a cool transformation out of it, but so when I saw the preview for this, I was like, oh, this is cool. Like, you have a most dangerous game element with a werewolf. That's cool. You cannot mess this up. And by golly, somehow Disney Plus says if there's a way to screw it up, we will find it. But maybe I'm just being too negative. Why don't you talk about the stuff you really liked about it?
Okay. And it's possible that as we go through this, you will kind of point out what you didn't like, and it's possible I will agree with you because I liked a lot of the stuff that was like in concept, a lot of the stuff they did. I should point out, I know very little about any of these characters from the comics. To my knowledge, you don't really know that much about them in the comics either. But
nope.
I know there is a character from the 70s who is in a comic called Werewolf by Night. His name is Jack Russell. I know Elsa Bloodstone from the Warren Ellis comic book series Next Wave Agents of Hate. And I know Ulysses Bloodstone was in some horror comics from the 70s. He hunted monsters and stuff. And I know Man-Thing very little. He was in an X-Men comic I read very recently, and I know I like him less than I like Swamp Thing. And so I didn't really know any of these characters from the comic. So like some people may know, like, hey, this is just a bad representation of Man-Thing based on whatever. I don't really care about them in the comics, but I think I just like this because it's so different than everything else that we've seen with Marvel. I wish that we could have been seeing like shorts like this going back, like after the success of the first Avengers movie. I feel like, now they didn't have the Disney Plus platform at that time, but I feel like they could have started doing like, here's a 5-minute short featuring Howard the Duck right before like Iron Man 3 or something like that. I feel like they could have been doing stuff like that going all the way back then. Now, once you've had like a gigantic juggernaut like the first Avengers movie, then it's okay for you to experiment a little. And here's somebody who's never directed a movie before and give them a chance to do something. And then here's some characters that would not be able to sustain their own full-length movie, but then you can give the audience a taste of them in a shorter thing. So I liked all of that. And this may sound a little negative, but I liked how disconnected it was from the MCU. Because, I have been really hard on the MCU since Far From Home, and I like that this just felt like, I told a friend it felt like if Robert Rodriguez was doing like like for most of it, it feels like an homage to like the Universal horror movies from like the 30s and 40s. And then towards the very, very end, I was looking at it and I was like, oh, this looks like it's paying homage to like the 1970s Hammer movies. And like, the Peter Cushing, Christopher Lee Dracula or something like that. And so I I know that those went from like the 50s to the 70s, but I've mostly just seen the ones from like Dracula 1972 AD. But so I don't know. I think I just liked the look and feel of it, and this just felt like something new to me. It didn't feel like, I haven't necessarily jumped on the bandwagon of like, oh, everything in the MCU feels exactly the same. But I have been kind of discontent with the MCU for a while now, and this felt different enough that I, for one, enjoyed what I was watching. But what was it, Connor, that you didn't like about it?
Well, I'm actually glad you brought up Robert Rodriguez, because I would say the best version of something like this is Planet Terror.
Mm-hmm.
So I do have to like throw some critics' feet to the fire. And I'm no, this is kind of regarding stuff that you're not as into. So I apologies. I'll just say this as fast as possible. I've seen a number of critics being like, "Wow, did they shoot this on film? This looks like they could have shot it." No, like you're a paid critic for real? No, like this is Planet Terror. They shot it digitally, and they just threw on some scuffs and cigarette burns and black and white filter. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
like come on, like this. No, get out of here. But anyways, that aside, and the thing is, like, sure. Would I have liked it if it was in a 4:3 aspect ratio, had a mono soundtrack, had like no musical score, because those early Universal monster movies don't have a musical score? Would I have liked all of that kind of pastiche stuff? I would have, sure. But it doesn't have to have that for me to like it. Like Planet Terror, and the reason I want to compare it to Planet Terror is because Planet Terror is not an accurate representation of 1970s exploitation films. It is a wish fulfillment of those movies, because those movies would always have these awesome posters to like sell you a ticket, and then once you got in, it's like that was like it completely lied to you. Basically, it's like people just sitting around a dumpy room for like 90 minutes, and then something cool will happen for like 5 minutes, and that's it. But the poster promises you something cool. And that's what Planet Terror is. And other movies do this too, like Godzilla versus Kong, I think is like that too. And I think Werewolf by Night is trying to be like a Planet Terror. It's like if you're a young kid and you're watching the Universal monster movies, you are aware that they don't have the visual effects and the blood and the kind of cool stuff that like we have now, but in your head you kind of want to use your imagination to fill in those gaps. And so I imagine the intent here was similarly as the intent with Planet Terror, or with, I would also say, Godzilla versus Kong, with the Showa era Godzilla movies, and trying to realize that with all these visual effects and big budgets. I just think this does a bad job at it. I think as a universal horror movie, or like as a 1930s homage, it doesn't understand that material. Because the problem is, I've actually seen the 1930s Universal monster movies, at least a number of them. And I feel like this is made for people who have never seen those but want to pretend like they have, and they can go, "Wow, look at Marvel! They're doing a 1930s thing." And I know you did not like WandaVision at all. And I will say though, what I like about WandaVision, and honestly, as time has gone on, you've been vindicated because I've liked that less and less as time has gone on. But one thing I will say that I enjoy about WandaVision is that show does commit to a cinematic language that is of the era it's trying to homage. It's committing to kind of hacky sitcoms from a bygone era, and it's doing that authentically. And I think you don't like that because you just don't like those sitcoms, right?
Right. Yeah.
And I get that, and I respect that. With this though, it's in as big of a hurry to not do horror as possible. And I think, well, okay, it's actually an action thing. And then it's not even that. Like, it's in as quick of a hurry to be as done with the action as possible. Really, it's just about two boring characters that I don't like sitting in a room and then talking about found family or something, like every Marvel movie is. Hey, the Avengers, it's about found family. Black Widow, your entire character has been about being a part of the Avengers and finding your family. What are you going to do with your solo movie? What about my other found family that I have? How about I sit with them in rooms and talk about being a found family? And Guardians of the Galaxy is about being a found family. And the Thunderbolts is going to be about being a found family. And it's like, I don't care. So anyways, I've been rambling on a little more. I have a few other notes that we can talk about as we go on, but like, that's primarily the thing. When I was watching this, my excitement was like, ooh, I'm so excited to watch this. And then you could just see my enthusiasm drop as it went on.
I can see where you're coming from. I guess I'm wondering if this was like, if this would be like watching like the first episode of some TV series from the 90s, where it's like basically we're just trying to set up the lore and the world and establish who our characters are and what they're about. And then later episodes are the ones where it's like, okay, I really like this episode because it tells us a little bit about our characters, or it, now that we, like if you went back to Buffy the Vampire Slayer, I'm going to assume most people aren't going to say that the two-part premiere of Buffy the Vampire Slayer is probably not anyone's favorite. It establishes, okay, this is Sunnydale. This is the Hellmouth that attracts all these weird monsters and stuff. Here's Buffy. She slays monsters and vampires. And then later episodes kind of get deeper into character and some of that stuff. And so I wonder if this is trying to be like that, and if we're going to get more shorts like this in the future, and then we will later get a chance to dive deeper into either Elsa Bloodstone or Jack Russell. Do you think that's what they're trying to do, or do you think this is like just a one-time thing?
If I had to wager a guess, this has gotten an extremely positive response. I would say most people that I'm seeing respond to this are responding the way you are, and I'm very happy for you that you actually got a Marvel thing you generally really, really liked. I think that we might have Jack Russell show up as a sort of Mad Max character, because the reality is this is an Elsa Bloodstone special. But Jack Russell is sort of like the POV character, and by the end of this story, Elsa Bloodstone is content, and Jack Russell's going out to have another adventure, presumably. So I would imagine if we get another Werewolf by Night special, maybe they'll do a Tomb of Dracula, and Jack Russell will show up in that as the sort of person to help whoever the protagonist of that story is going to be. If I had to wager a guess, he might show up every year in that capacity.
Yeah, and
In
I
Blade,
for
he'll show up in Blade. That's my prediction.
Yeah, a friend of mine was saying that he thinks they will be mentioned in Blade, and I was like, I don't like, I have nothing against Mahershala Ali. I feel like I'm one of those people. I can say, hey, I knew who he was way back when, because he was in the 4400, and like nobody knows what that show is, but I watched it when it was first coming out. But I want Mahershala Ali to do well, but I don't want this thing that I like I said, this is just its own little thing in its own corner. And I very nearly laughed out loud when it said something like, you've already heard about the Marvel universe, but what about the dark? And I thought it was going to say the dark universe, and I was like, what? but it didn't do that. But I'm going to be less enthused if we get another short and it's going to be like, hey, I hope you guys watched Doctor Strange 3 because Elsa Bloodstone shows up in that, and then like Jack Russell shows up in the Blade movie and he meets Jon Snow from the Eternals, and I'm just going to be like, I don't want that. Like I just want these guys to like keep having adventures in the horror section of the Marvel universe, but I don't necessarily want I don't want to do homework to figure out, okay, what have these guys been doing since I stopped, the last time I watched them. And I've been complaining about that since like the beginning of the MCU. Like, if you really enjoyed the Iron Man movie and the Hulk movie and the Captain America movie, but if you didn't like the Thor movie and then you go to the Avengers, it's like, oh, this is kind of another Thor movie because Loki is the bad guy, and it like you need to know about Thor to kind of get what's going on with the Avengers. Like, and I will say sometimes these movies do a better job of kind of holding your hand and catching you up to speed, and sometimes they don't. But what I loved about this one so much was I didn't need to do any homework. I could just jump right in. It does kind of a goofy little like there are dark corners of this universe, and here we go. We're at a funeral. Let's go. And so you're probably right. They're probably gonna get used in like I would say Blade. You're probably right. I was expecting at the very end, spoilers, Jack Russell is hanging out with Man-Thing, and I was expecting Howard the Duck to walk in and say, hey guys, what did I miss? Because Howard the Duck, I think, is friends with Man-Thing in the comics. And so I was expecting that, and I was kind of surprised we didn't do that, but I wonder if they're going to remember that they've teased Howard the Duck a couple times in the movies and do something with him here.
Maybe, yeah, they're both Man-Thing and Howard the Duck are both Steve Gerber creations, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And I was trying for the life of me to remember who that creator was. I kept thinking Steve Englehart. No, that's not right. And so yes, it is Steve Gerber. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Well, you had said Dark Universe, and I'm glad you did because my letterboxed review of this movie says that this is Marvel's hour-long adaptation of the Dark Universe trailer. Did you ever see the Dark Universe trailer?
I think so. Yeah, it was like, footage from like the movies from the 30s and 40s, but it was like with exciting like modern air quotes modern music. Was that the one I'm thinking of?
Yeah, it's got like this epic, dramatic, like blockbuster music playing while it's like these old movies from the 30s and 40s, and it's like the reason I would compare that trailer to this is because it's only interested that trailer is only interested in the Universal monsters insofar as their iconography. To be like, look at guys, you know what that is. You've never seen it, but you know what it is. Get excited for the Dark Universe. And that's what this sort of felt like to me, where it's like, oh, okay. It's like to me, all like the black and white and like the scratches and like all that stuff just kind of felt like a gimmick to me, where it didn't feel like it was wanting to be that. It was just like, hey, it kind of looks like that. Anyways, but and that was just my letterboxd review of it. But yeah, I'm not sure where these people will show up, but I don't know. For myself though, I don't know if I'd want to see them show up elsewhere, because to me it does sort of feel like, well, Man-Thing is just kind of Groot again.
Yeah.
He's the lovable pet sidekick. I don't need that. Although Groot I think is actually more of a character in those Guardians of the Galaxy movies. Mostly the first one because he's just like a child in the second one. But the thing is, like I don't find Jack all that compelling. Although I do like Gael Garcia Bernal as an actor. And I never want to see Elsa Bloodstone ever again because I found her very annoying. But
okay,
that's
yeah.
just
Well, now with Man Thing, I not trying to like plug my own content here, but I did recently read an X-Men comic where Man Thing is a guest star, and I kind of went on this like diatribe where I said like Man Thing and Swamp Thing both like appeared in like the same month, or it was like 2 months apart or something like that. Like it was close enough that it's weird, but also so close that like I personally don't believe that anybody at Marvel or DC was like, quick, we've got to get a muck monster out there because the competition just did one. I don't think they did that. I think it's just a really weird coincidence. But what I like about Swamp Thing is that depending on what era it is, he's either a man who has turned into a swamp monster and wants to turn back into a man, or he is a swamp monster who has the memories of a man and knows that he cannot turn back into a man. But either way, he has a personality, and his memories, whether he's a man who thinks he's, whatever, he has agency and he has characteristics. Like I can't, like, I know that Man Thing was formerly a man named Ted Sallis, and so they call him Ted here. But like you described him as like the team pet, and yeah, he kind of acts like a really big puppy dog here. And like with Jack is able to communicate with him, but you wouldn't necessarily, if I showed this to my parents, they wouldn't know that Man Thing was formerly a scientist. And so like you're right, Man Thing is just kind of a thing that like is just kind of hanging out. Like he doesn't feel like a character, like you were saying.
Yeah, and beyond that, I like the Marvelness of this was very pervasive to me. Primarily the Disney Plusness of this, I could not shake off. When like we can get into the action later, but when it came to like uh so the last episode of She-Hulk I watched, they do the Star Lord joke twice in the same episode, which like the who are you? I'm Star-Lord.
Oh yeah.
Who? They do that twice in one episode of She-Hulk.
Okay.
And then you get that same joke in this. So we got the same joke on Disney Plus 3 times by Marvel in a week, where in She-Hulk it's like, my name is Leapfrog, and people are like, who? And then
Mhm.
later Daredevil says, I'm Daredevil, and then She-Hulk's like, who? And then in this one, he's like, Elsa Bloodstone's like, you know the monster? He's like, his name is, and then the music goes out, Ted. Ted? It's like, are we still doing that joke? It's
Mhm.
almost 2023. Well, he's a monster, but his name's just Dave, man. Sometimes Dave just likes, we're zombie bros. Like sometimes Elizabeth Banks needs to get off, my back, and I just gotta have my zombie bro like sleep on my couch. You know what I mean? I'm Jason Segel, and like my buddy James Franco, who's a zombie. Maybe just need to sit on get my Elizabeth Banks, get off my back. Like, I'm like, really? Like, his name's Ted. He likes sushi. Hey, he's a pet. Whatever. Like, what? Come on. Like, I'm getting a little irritated by the lack of taking itself seriously, and I think there's a balance that needs to be struck where I grew up in the era of everyone taking everything seriously. So I get why you'd want to, there was Christopher Nolan, and then everyone was trying to emulate Christopher Nolan, and then all of that was bad. And so now we need to like try to find something else to do. And then Joss Whedon does the Avengers and more or less sets the tone of what Marvel was going to do moving forward. And Joss Whedon's a cheeky fella, I would say, as a writer. He's got a lot of tongue in cheek kind of self awareness, self deprecation going on. But I think what Joss Whedon does do is he does take it seriously enough. He takes the rules of the world seriously, and I feel like as we've gone on, Marvel has done that less and less. And with this, it was like it's not taking itself seriously at all, but it does want to like have some kind of prestige of like aesthetically, cosmetically making changes. But I don't know. Like to me, it feels fake. It feels like a gimmick.
Yeah, and I saw someone on Reddit also say that like other than like the black and white stuff that it felt too marbly for them. And I at the time when I saw that I was like that's weird. I don't really see that at all. But I also in my defense, I haven't watched She-Hulk, I haven't watched Moon Knight, I haven't watched Miss Marvel. What else have I not watched? I haven't watched Thor Love and Thunder or Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. So I'm pretty behind on the Marvel stuff, and so like that Star Wars joke, I haven't seen that since I have probably seen the first Guardians movie twice, I think. And so I don't remember the last time I saw the first Guardian. So like that, I guess I gave a little bit of a pass to that here. And sometimes I kind of liked the humor, and then sometimes like I felt like this was more serious, more taking itself more seriously than a lot of the others. I'm a big fan of the Nolan Batman movies, but I actually kind of hate the scene in Batman Begins when the police are chasing Batman and one of them's like, just tell me what it looks like. And then the car drives by, he's like, never mind. I'm just like, I really hated that. I'm like, if I could just shake my magic 8 ball and just like erase that like 3 seconds of film, just erase it from existence, that I'd be happy. But like, you get a similar joke in the first Avengers movie where Tony says, "Hey guys, I brought the party to you," and then it's like a giant space whale coming towards him, and Black Widow says, "I don't see how that's a party." It's like, okay, like, yeah, we get it, witty dialogue, but like it's not funny. Like, I don't know, like, so, to every man for himself, or to each his own. Maybe some people just are rolling in the floor laughing when they heard that. But so some of that here like is probably like, for example, the evil stepmother, like she yells at Elsa at one point, like the stone goes to whoever wins the hunt. She yells that, and then she quietly says house rules, and it's like, haha, look, she's like, she's yelling, and then she's kind of being nice and quiet and timid or whatever. And um some of it, like I say, I was willing to give a pass, and then some of it kind of like I feel like was kind of rubbing me the wrong way.
Okay. The other thing I had a problem with was the action, where when I thought like you can't mess this up, like the premise of what this is so cool, and it's like what you should do is you should let your action dictate your character. Like this should be a very action driven thing. Oh, it's not really a horror thing, it's an action thing. Okay, cool. Like this is very much what you should do is get a Viking, get like a ninja, get a Comanche warrior, get all of these awesome like warrior people. They all show up and you can just like look at them and see how cool they are. And sort of like through character design and just things that they're like maybe holding weapons wise, you can get a feel of maybe who they are. You can see the scars and maybe I can't believe I'm using this character as an example, but Boba Fett. Okay, like here's what you should do. You should have like this opening 10 minutes where like Jack Russell's meeting all of them. Let's say this is Star Wars, right? And like we got some guy and he meets Boba Fett, and you look at Boba Fett and you go, okay, jetpack, blaster, bulletproof armor. Okay, gotcha. And then later, like that's all set up, but like you don't call it out. Looking at them and kind of getting a feel through character design is the setup. And then later, when they have to fight each other, you're like, all right, Boba Fett's using the blaster. Now he's using the jetpack, but then, oh my God, he starts flamethrower. Like flames are shooting out of his wrists, right? Like, whoa, didn't expect that. Then, like, stakes get raised during this action scene. And you have these cool, memorable action scenes, and it's just a series of those. In the case of this, like, you get these, like, cool characters that are all set up, and you wonder, like, I wonder what they're all about. Then you get 5 seconds of action with them, and then as quick as humanly possible, Elsa and Jack get stuck in a room together so they can talk about found families. And then like you had like 5 quick 20 seconds of action before they get stuck in a like a cage together so they can keep talking about what they were talking about earlier. And I was really let down by that because it's like you don't need to have characters talking to each other about common interests to develop a character. You can develop character through action. Like that's what the best action movies do. And it can be fun and exciting, but also have a depth understanding of characters. The problem is, and this is why I say like, it's too Marvel-y, Marvel doesn't do that. They don't do the Mad Max Fury Road thing. They don't do they don't do that. They do characters talking about their common themes.
Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So how? Because I think I agree with you. Like, because there is not a lot of action here. And and like, as for me, I don't necessarily speak in film terms like you do. So if I was watching something like, I really enjoy Mad Max Fury Road. I like Beyond Thunderdome quite a bit also. But I don't know, like, because I think a lot of people have also said that, like, oh, that movie, like, you learn a lot about Max even though he doesn't talk a lot. And I guess for myself, I just don't really see it, and I've only like seen that movie a couple times. So how would you, like, you probably have already explained it, and it's just kind of going over my head, but how would you have done like a scene that shows us who Elsa Bloodstone is through action?
Okay. What if okay, hold on. I gotta maybe like think about this now.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
Yeah, and like, critique and like creation are different things, and
Mm-hmm.
so maybe this is, like, me getting a little lost with my words. Just want to throw that out there. Like, they're different, but if
Yeah.
you're the biggest studio in the world, I think you should be able to find a way.
Mm-hmm.
How about, like, what I don't like about Elsa Bloodstone is that we get nothing about her here, and I think the difference between Elsa and everyone else is that, like, they are all like professional monster hunters, and if I was in charge of this, I wouldn't even have the Elsa Bloodstone element. But we do. But the thing is, what if she ran away from home? What if she loved her dad, but she hated her stepmom? And
Mm-hmm.
then so she's back. And then it's like, maybe early on you set up that the stepmother's like, oh, some trinkets have been missing from whatever, or like some weapons have been lost from the vault that we'll never get back or whatever. And then at the end, Elsa's gonna kill her stepmom, and then she pulls out some awesome sword and is like, oh crap, Elsa actually stole that when she ran away from home, and now she's gonna kill her stepmom with her dad's sword, or something, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, oh, there's like implied history there, or like maybe you need to use dialogue to set up what certain things are, because there's backstory between this character and that character. But like, as opposed to just being like, oi blimey, I'm Elsa Bloodstone, I got a chip on my shoulder, I don't like my dad, I don't like me stepmom, I don't want to be a monster hunter, I just want to be a rich cool queen, I want to slay queen. Like, like what, huh? Like, I don't get a sense of who she is, besides she looks like if you took Kristen Ritter and Rebecca Ferguson and put them into one human being. That's like the only thing I get out of her.
By the way, stop reading my diary for my ideal woman. No, I'm just kidding. No, I actually, a huge chunk of this, I thought this was the chick from Teen Wolf. And I actually stopped to look it up. I was like, and I also thought, I was like, this is the worst British accent I've ever heard. And she may actually be British, but because I had the same thing with what's her face from Stranger Things. She was in that movie Enola Holmes, and I saw a trailer for it, and I was like, ooh, that's a bad British accent. And my mom was like, no, she's actually British. And I was like, okay, then she needs to be better at being British, because that's awful. And so this woman may actually be British, but the whole time I was like, that chick from Teen Wolf needs to like be better. And then I was like, oh, it's not her. Okay. Turns out the chick from Teen Wolf was in the Swamp Thing show on HBO Max. So I guess they're both hanging out with swamp monsters. But I should point out that Warren Ellis, who I believe is the one who created Elsa Bloodstone, I have come to the decision that he cannot write anything unless he puts a sarcastic Brit who likes to smoke in his story.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I recently read, I was in a little bit of a Thor mood recently, and so I read some stuff from the 90s. I read some stuff from about 10 years ago. He wrote a 4-issue storyline for Thor called The World Engine, and for some reason, there was this British police officer who had transferred to New York City, and this guy like doesn't really interact with the Thor elements of the story. He's just there to like be grumpy and smoke, and he's like investigating this Norse zombie type thing that shows up. And the whole time I'm thinking, like, Warren Ellis is incapable of writing a story unless he puts himself in the story as a character. And then I was thinking about, like, he did Planetary, which has Elijah Snow, who is a grumpy Brit who likes to smoke. And then he did Stormwatch, which later transformed into The Authority, which has Jenny Sparks, who is a grumpy Brit who likes to smoke. And then I was like, I just kind of like, it dawned on me. I was like, Oh, he's kind of a hack. Okay, and someone out there is probably going to say, well, what about that 3-issue Storm miniseries from the '90s? Where, and I'm like, okay, yeah, not everything he's written, but it's kind of like Stephen King with writers from Maine fighting the forces of evil, right? Like I've made
Yeah,
that
yeah.
statement before, and um, so I guess like I would have to go back because I really do enjoy the Next Wave Agents of Hate miniseries. I thought it was really fun. It didn't take itself too seriously, which it's funny how like we kind of complain about how like, oh, the Marvel stuff, they're constantly doing the jokes that aren't funny, and then like I'll say, hey, this is a fun comic, and that's why I like it. But like sometimes I think comics can try to be too self-serious, and so when I'm in comics, I like it when something can just be fun and like a light breezy read. But I really enjoyed Next Wave Agents of Hate, and I should say Elsa Bloodstone probably doesn't have a whole lot going on there either, other than being a grumpy Brit who likes to smoke. And
Mm.
so this show doesn't necessarily elevate that character a whole lot. But I was thinking when I was watching it, like I do feel like this is showing us a little bit about who she is more than like when you look at these other monster hunters, they're all like, ooh, I just want to kill, and I don't care about what I kill. And then Elsa, who knows what would have happened if she had come across Man Thing before coming across Jack. But like, you know, the guy with the big beard, he like swings an axe at Jack's head, and he knows Jack is there because he hears Jack talking to Elsa. And this is a guy who was like being friendly with Jack earlier before the reading of the will, if you will. But then he's like, oh, I'm going to kill Jack because he is in the way of me getting what I want. And then when Elsa and Jack run into each other, they don't immediately try to kill each other. And Jack is like, hey, why don't we just pass by? And then she doesn't just immediately attack him. And then he tells her, like, you know, let's get the monster out of here alive. And she doesn't question him too much. She doesn't say, like, look, monsters are evil. You know how, again, did you ever watch any of the Underworld movies?
Oh, I've seen all of the Underworld movies.
I am so sorry. Those movies, uh they're not great, are they? But I one time I skipped Spanish class in college to watch Underworld Rise of the Lycans on DVD with a friend.
Oh,
I
you didn't even get Kate Beckinsale on that one. I'm
no,
sorry.
no, got what's her face? Rona Mitra, is that it? But yeah, so with one of those movies, I think it's the first or the second one. Kate Beckinsale's character talks about how much she loves killing werewolves, and it's like she's kind of awful. Like like the werewolves haven't done anything to her, but I guess you could have written it in that like there's this like brainwashing going on both sides. Like the werewolves are saying like all vampires are evil. It doesn't matter who and what they are, even though there might be some vampires who aren't evil. Like they're just minding their own business. And then meanwhile, all the vampires are saying, look, all the werewolves are evil. Like they're just disgusting creatures and they would kill you as soon as they look at you or something like that. And but we've got this character who says, oh, she just loves killing monsters. And what we have here in Werewolf by Night, I feel like it's maybe not as much as what you would have wanted, but I feel like Elsa agreeing, like I'm not going to kill Man Thing, that shows her that shows us that she is different than the others that are at this soiree.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't get a lot out of her beyond she just kind of has a chip on her shoulder because she doesn't like her stepmom, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I mean, I hate her stepmom too, but I just think she's annoying to look at because I can't tell if she's supposed to be funny or not. And if she is funny, I don't find it funny. And if she's not supposed to be funny, then why does she make the goofy faces she makes? I don't want to say I dislike that actress. That actress is from Frasier. She was in Licorice Pizza, which she was really, really funny in. I generally like that actress, but not here. The other thing
I
goes,
just want to say licorice pizza is part of a trilogy of non-edible items. We have gunpowder milkshake, licorice pizza, and the upcoming glass onion. The triarchy of things you shouldn't eat. Anyway, carry on.
nice, nice. Nonsense titles are the best. Am I right? American Graffiti. But the thing is, I don't know. Like, I don't get enough from the characters here beyond generically found family. Like, I wish Gael Garcia Bernal as Jack had more personality. Like, maybe he like kind of has like kind of a suave, cool, like understated thing. Here, he's just kind of like a guy. Like, he's just kind of a hapless bumbling goof, I guess, but like he doesn't even have a lot of personality in that regard. Like he's just sort of like this guy who walks around that has makeup on his face. I don't know what to make of him.
Mm-hmm.
Like what if he's, because they mentioned that, oh, you have over 100 kills to your name, and it's only because he's a werewolf. But then how do they attribute his kills to him? Because it seems like he's not in control of becoming a werewolf, right?
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. Like that's just the sort of stuff that I was kind of asking questions about. And then also, hey, you know that Batman trope I always like to call out, and you've caught onto it too. Like you've mentioned it a few times. Like when when uh when Batman needs to get out of a situation, he always conveniently has this prototype that's never been tested in the field. Let me see if I can use it. And what do you know? He's able to use it. No problem. Works every time. There's like the same thing in this show happens like twice, where it's like, oh no, I'm gonna turn into a vamp, or I'm wow, okay. Oh no, I'm gonna turn into a werewolf. Uh, quick, I gotta smell you so I can know your scent. And she's like, has it ever worked? And he's like, once. So it's like, all right, it will only work one time, so that way there can be tension that it might not work again. But also, it worked once, so it's not a Deus Ex Machina if it works this time. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that to me is the same as Batman has a prototype that's never been used in the field, but doggone it, it might be the only hope we have.
Yeah.
It's also used one other time, that kind of writing trick, but I can't remember when just yet. I might need to
Um, you had mentioned the kills where they were like, so and so he's killed this many, and so's killed it, and I was curious because I so it's going to sound, I think by the end of this podcast it's going to sound like I didn't like it as much, but I think that just comes from like having a discussion. But I wasn't sure if like Jack Russell was lying, or like do they have a magical way of telling how many kills each of them have had, because I wasn't sure if Jack just comes in and says, oh yeah, I've killed 30 billion monsters, yeah, and then like, because later we find out, oh, he is also a werewolf, and so what has he been telling the truth about this whole time, and what has he been lying about this whole time? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like
Mhm.
and I like the actor too, but it is kind of like, okay, what what can we trust about him, and what can do we have to reevaluate? He's kind of like a an unreliable narrator, right? Where once
Yeah.
we find out something about him, then we have to say, wait a minute, then what about all this other stuff? And so I was a little curious if he was just lying just to get in there and rescue Man Thing.
Yeah, well, what if the whole time he actually comes across as like really creepy, like a
Mm-hmm.
serial killer, where it's like he is like very kind of slender and less suit. And what if he's like kind of creepy and like Elsa's like creeped out by him, and then the twist is that he's actually just there to, to be there for his swamp buddy, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But like at the same time though, what if he does know he's a werewolf and he likes being a werewolf so he can kill things?
Yeah.
Like you're like, what if he's like, I hate the Bloodstone family. I'm here because I know there's gonna be a full moon and I want to kill your stepmom.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what if that's a thing where it's like, oh, he's actually kind of a monster? Like that would be, I think, more interesting. And I just came up with that off the top of my head. Also, I remembered the other thing that was basically the Batman prototype writing
Oh yeah.
trick, which is, oi, blimey, we're stuck in this old tomb. Wait a minute, I just remembered. My auntie, when she died, she left me this cryptic message that if I was ever locked in a tomb, that she wanted to be buried with keys to be like to
Yeah.
be let out. Really? Okay, sure.
Yeah. And I was I
It's
wasn't.
luckily it's lucky she just remembered that at the end of a conversation about found family, so
Mhm.
that the two characters can be united in some kind of thematic way. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, no, go ahead. That's good. I was on the one hand, I agree with you. Like that is very much a like, okay, the scene is over. It's time for her to bust out the thing to get them out here. But I did kind of like that. What like while you said Jack Russell is kind of a goof, I like that. Like in that scene, she is the one who gets them out, and she's the one who proves like she is not a sidekick. She's capable of handling herself in a dangerous situation. And then later, again, you didn't like this part, but like when it's about time for him to be transformed into a wolf, then he kind of turns it around. He says, "Hey, I'm going to try this," and then it shows, okay, he's not just the useless sidekick. Maybe they could have handled it a little better, but it kind of reminded me of Fury Road, where like at one point Max is going to try and shoot somebody, and then he puts the gun on Charlize Theron's shoulder, and then later he gives the gun to her, and it's kind of like a equal partner kind of situation.
Hmm.
Yeah, I maybe it could have been used in a better plot. And I wonder how much of this is a limitation of like, did Marvel say you have 50 minutes, do whatever you want, but you have 50 minutes, and then it was like, well, I don't have a whole lot of time, like, and maybe he should have like just tried. I'm just gonna focus on like Elsa, or I'm just gonna focus on Jack, and then I can like introduce these other characters, but I don't necessarily have to focus on because in a sitcom, like you have 20 minutes and you have like a B plot and an A plot. Scratch that, reverse it. And then like you've got several characters that you might be doing a story about. And so in 25 minutes or 20 minutes. And so like in theory, he's got plenty of time. Michael Giacchino and whoever the writers are, they've got plenty of time where they could flesh out two characters. But like you said, I don't know, like I don't know what all they could have done with these characters. But now that you talk about it, I do feel like there isn't a whole lot going on with them, and I feel kind of shallow for saying I liked it because I think a lot of what I did like was the aesthetic, like hey, it looks like what we think horror movies from the 30s looked like. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
Like what you were saying earlier about how like not Pulp Fiction, but Planet Terror is tricking you into thinking this is what movies from the 70s were like.
Yeah, yeah. And I do want to reiterate, like, you can do that in a way that I like because I do really like Planet Terror. Um, I think that's what make Planet Terror and Death Proof like a really fun double feature is that one is more authentic to what those were like, and the other is not. Um,
Mm.
and I like both of them a lot. So let's talk about the big ending because you were kind of talking about like I think that's actually kind of a good call comparing it to Fury Road where it's like they both kind of scratch each other's back in terms of helping each other out of situations or learning to trust one another. I think you can do that in a way that is still more action oriented and you know like you're not sacrificing character and you're not sacrificing action because that's really what this is. When you have a shot of Gail Garcia Bernal walking into like it's like maze and it's this awesome cool reveal shot. When I see that I think, ooh, think of all the cool action scenes we can have in that, right? And it's like we have two and they're
Mm-hmm.
really fast. However, when it comes to um, the big werewolf transformation scene, I was a little let down here. So I think the actual transformation is really cool and comic booky. I like that it's like a dolly in on her as she's like against the bars, like freaking out, and you see like his silhouette or his shadow in a strobe light transforming into a wolf.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say, it's my favorite kind of werewolf where it can like stand on its legs and it's kind of man-like. I really like those kind of werewolves the most, where there's like clothes that are ripped and hanging off of it. It kind of looks like the Hulk, sort of, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, I like that. That's my favorite kind of werewolf. And I do think that the werewolf in this looks really, really cool. I'm also disappointed that it's barely on screen. This is the Disney Plus element. So you did not watch Moon Knight, did you?
No.
I first sort of became aware of this in Moon Knight, and I can't not notice it now. Primarily in the Disney Plus shows. It's in Ms. Marvel too. You have an action scene where you're like, all right, our hero is here to do the thing. They're gonna go over and get into a fight with this guy, this bad guy. And they go over there, they get about 3 or 4 good looks in, but then luckily they're with someone else who's also in an action scene. So we can cut away from Moon Knight beating up some guys to this random person beating up some guys. So that we can cut back to Moon Knight beating people up, maybe kicking a guy for a couple of seconds. Now we can cut back to this one lady beating up some guys. Now we can cut to Jack Russell ripping people up for about 4 seconds, and then we cut over to Elsa Bloodstone, killing people and it's like it feels like they under choreographed this, and maybe they choreograph it all the same. Like all of these things have the same choreography, and it's like we don't have enough time to come up with these really cool like choreographed action scenes. So we just need to have just enough for this guy, just enough for like two people, so that we can cut between the two. So it's like we can cut away from one action scene fast enough so that it's we don't give up the ghost, so to speak.
Mhm.
And I became aware of that at first with Moon Knight, because Moon Knight's not in his own show very much at all. And when he does show up, we keep cutting away from him. And it's like the same thing with the werewolf. Now we do have that sequence that's in like the hallway as like a door is closing, and there's more like werewolf doing werewolf kills there. But then also it does the thing where it like throws CGI blood on the lens so that we can cover it up.
Mhm.
Like, come on, really? And then also Elsa Bloodstone gets like the satisfaction of killing all of these like monster hunters that she didn't even really meet. What was the point of the first 10 minutes then? You have Jack meet all of them so he can kill all of them. Like, why did you meet David Bowie so that Elsa Bloodstone could kill David Bowie? She didn't even interact with him at all. I don't know. That was like kind of confusing to me.
Did the bearded guy die? Because I thought I was paying attention to this, but then whenever Jack tries to grab the bloodstone and then they put him and Elsa in the cage, bearded guy is gone at that point. So what happened to him?
Oh, they didn't he die? Like they cut his head off or something?
Maybe I guess I just either wasn't paying attention or I saw it and then I just completely forgot because I was like I thought that he was still like somewhere in the maze, but um, it's it's gonna sound like I wasn't paying attention, but I was like the whole time I was like, where did he go? But yeah, yeah, and by the way, I do want to say I did really like the scene where he's transforming and you're seeing the shadow on the wall as it's zooming in. I thought that was pretty cool. But yeah, I agree with you. We don't get a whole lot of werewolf here. And I think I probably would have been okay with that if we had because I am kind of the opinion that like if this had done some pretty good character interaction stuff, I would have been fine with it being minimal on the action. But you're right, the character interaction stuff we have is also very minimal, and so it leaves you with not a whole lot of anything. Because they basically just talk in the scene where they're in the crypt and then the scene where they're in the cage together. And if it had been like they're teaming up and like they're in the maze throughout the whole middle chunk of the episode, we might could have had some more I don't know character development between the two through dialogue. And I know that wouldn't have been like you were saying that you'd like to have seen character development through action. But I think if you are unable to do that, then at the very least, character development through dialogue would have been preferable, right?
Yeah, yeah. I just don't trust this to do that because I think they were trying to do character development through dialogue, and yeah, I was not satisfied with it.
Yeah, I think this is one of those things that I like I said earlier, I think I was manipulated into liking it because of the visuals made me think, oh, this is different than what we've gotten before. And I still like I will probably rewatch this before I try to watch like any of the other shows. Like, and part of that is this is less than an hour long, whereas like Moon Knight is probably like 7 or 8 hours long, and I don't want to spend that much time on a show like that. But I think you're right. I liked it because it was making me think, oh, you know, old horror stuff from decades gone. But then it didn't do as well as I was thinking it had.
Okay. And I don't know. I never want to be that guy who's like, your opinion's trash. I want to
Hmm.
change your people's opinions. Like I'm not really in that business. But I don't know. I feel bad for making you like it less is what I'm trying to say. But
No, no,
um,
that's fine because I did enjoy it at the time. I wanted to make a mention. There was I don't watch the show It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, but I have watched a couple of clips on YouTube and bloopers. And there's an episode where everybody is at a restaurant and like Dee is at a table by herself, and then Frank and Charlie are at a table by themselves. And so and when the waiter tells Dee that he's going to take one of the chairs at her table, and then he ends up like dragging the chair, making a really loud screech as he brings it over. And then when Elsa did that, I was like, "Oh, Connor's gonna love this." But now I'm probably like, he probably won't love it. But that, and then when the stepmother said like Ulysses Bloodstone was a magnificent lover or something, I was kind of reminded of Young Frankenstein. I don't know if you've seen that movie, but Cloris Leachman's character, Frau Blucher, she there was one part where she is talking about how the Baron Frankenstein who came before was her boyfriend, and I was like, this is kind of giving me some Cloris Leachman vibes a little bit.
Hmm.
And like you, I was kind of like I felt like this woman was like, oh, she's just very evil. But then I feel like I don't know. I wish we could have gotten. I think her performance was very broad here, where she's just like at one point when she said like, "Oh, we're doing this to save human beings," and that could have been good if it was like if she genuinely like maybe like you said, she and all the Bloodstones and generations past they believe that something like the Man Thing or a werewolf is a threat to humanity and we have to kill it. That could have been interesting, and then that could have been like, well, Elsa doesn't believe that. Maybe Elsa has met a vampire and that vampire was trying, it was able to wean itself off human blood or something like that. But I felt like she was just too bwahaha, I'm evil in this. I don't know. So that was one like even before we started talking, I was thinking that her performance felt kind of off in this.
Yeah. Quick question: how did you feel about the Bloodstone being in color?
I kind of like that. It kind of I've only seen the movie Sin City once, and I know that movie had like here's like a red thing, and the rest is black and white. And I actually didn't think very much of Sin City the movie. I didn't really care for it, but like it and like the Spirit. I think the Spirit wasn't that also a Robert Rodriguez thing.
No, it was actually directed by Frank Miller
Oh, okay. Did
all by
did
himself.
did Rodriguez did he like produce it or something or did
He
he
may
direct
have.
or did he do Sin City?
He directed Sin City with Frank Miller. And
Okay.
so I think Frank Miller was like, "Oh, this is how you direct a movie." So then he made The Spirit.
Okay. But yeah, that I kind of liked it. What did you think of it?
I had no real opinion of it. It kind of reminded me of like, is the Bloodstone like an Infinity Stone or something? Because like that was kind of what the WandaVision did, right? Where it had like black and white stuff, and then stuff would be in color, but it was like supernatural stuff. I don't know.
Hmm.
The only reason I bring that up is because I was a little like so. My brother mentions this, so I should probably mention it. It's weird that um, Jack seems to know what the Bloodstone is, and
Hmm.
so when they have it in Man Thing, and it's like when your dog has like a thorn in its paw, and
Yeah.
it's like, oh, it's okay, buddy. I know it hurts you. I bet it hurts you. And then later, the Bloodstone gets like sent out of him, out of the Man Thing, and then
Hmm.
Jack's like, I'm gonna touch it. It's like, well, why? You know what it is, I guess. I'm
Hmm.
assuming you kind of alluded to the earlier that you knew what it was. I guess not. And then he's like starts seizing on the ground, and they're like, "Oh, you're a monster!" And then that way we can have the final act. But I brought up the Bloodstone's color because it seems to motivate a shift into color at the end, where it's like it's black and white, and then it becomes color. And it's not just like color; it's like really colorful Technicolor color.
Yeah.
And like somewhere over the rainbow is playing. And I was very confused. It felt like that was like I was like not in on a joke, and I was like, I feel like there's like a reason that I'm not picking up on as to why it's even in color right now.
Yeah. I will say I didn't get that part. And I saw someone else on Reddit who was saying that they thought that it should have just the whole thing should have been in that like 1970s color vibe.
Hmm.
And they thought it looked better that way. I guess I didn't think too much about why is the last like minute and a half in color. Maybe it's like a thematic thing where it's like Ulysses Bloodstone was a real pile of garbage, and now his era is ended, and Elsa has the Bloodstone, and now like we're in a brighter, more colorful future. Now she is gonna change the direction that House Bloodstone has been going in for centuries, and maybe that's what they're going for. If that's it, if it's that thematic reason, then that's maybe a little uh
Okay.
heavy-handed. I don't know, but because I'm not usually like I don't really read in the theme a whole lot, and a lot of times when like even though I was an English major in college, I really hated it when teachers in high school would say, "What is the writer trying to say here?" And I'm just like, just who cares? Like I'm just here
Yeah.
for the plot. But I kind of liked that the Bloodstone was like the only thing in color, but I don't really know why the last few minutes then was in color when the rest of it wasn't. I'm not really sure about that.
Okay. Well, hey, look at you. You always get down on yourself saying you don't pay attention to theme or whatnot. But hey, you had a stronger reading on it than I did. So, you know
um,
what?
I did have a question for you. Do you think this is set like in 2022, or do you think this is set like sometime in the past, like in the? Because there at the end, like we see I don't know what they call it, like it's kind of like a record player, but it's got the fancy little like horn thing that where
Yeah,
the
the gramophone.
yeah. And I saw that and I was like, they mention like, oh, there's the Marvels like heroes, and they show like kind of a silhouetted group shot of the Avengers, and so it's like, okay, I guess that means this is like at some point after after a group of heroes is formed, but like Captain America was active in the 40s, Ant-Man was active in the 60s, so like this could like I was kind of thinking maybe this is set in like the 70s, and like that's one way that they could keep it isolated from the rest of the MCU stuff. But do you think this is like that was just like stylistic stuff like Batman the Animated Series, and that this is set like in the whenever, however many years after Endgame it is that everything else is?
Yeah, I think it's taking place whenever now is. But I did have the thought of like, like I had the same thought. I was curious about it, but I think some of the other stuff could just be, oh, it's just old stuff that these people have held on to, I guess. So that was my conclusion.
Okay, yeah, and that's probably what they're gonna do. That was one thought that I kind of had. Well, those are our thoughts about Werewolf by Night. Did you have any other thing to say about this, Connor?
Just one. I will say, for all the grief I'm giving it about not being all that authentic, there is one aspect of it that it is pretty authentic to 1930s monster movies, which is the first 10 minutes all takes place in like one location. And it's like, well, we got this location. We have to shoot for 10 minutes. We have to make it 10 minutes no matter what. And I'm like, you know what? I kind of like that. Um, yeah.
Okay,
Which
yeah.
I would say the other thing about those Universal movies that like you can know, even as much as I don't really like the Wolfman, like there's always at least like one awesome character or actor. Like when you watch Dracula, everyone's kind of boring, but Bela Lugosi as Dracula is awesome. I
Mhm.
like everyone in Frankenstein, but Karloff is next level. And then Claude Rains as the Invisible Man, Claude Rains in the Wolfman. He's awesome in those, and everyone else is kind of a stiff. In this one, no actor is really, or no character is like super awesome and like has a lot of personality the way those classic monsters did amongst their kind of boring casts. So that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, I have to say I probably agree. I didn't hate any of the acting, but I didn't think watching this that like, oh, this person is just really bringing her A game. Like I thought it was all fine, but I wasn't just like I didn't think it was bad or great, I guess.
All right, sorry, yeah, that was just like another thing about like connecting it to the 30s stuff that I wanted to be sure to mention.
Yeah. So that's all we have to say about Werewolf by Night, and we will Connor and I will be speaking to each other again in a couple of days, but you will hear us again next week, whenever this goes up, where we will talk about Necromancer from the 80s. And in the meantime, I am the Comics Kid 2099,
And I'm Connor Nielsen.
and we'll see you guys then. Have a good one.